When the Civil War ended in 1865, gunfire faded, armies dissolved, and flags came down. But the war did not simply vanish. Its scars remained in the towns and cities where millions of people had lived their entire lives. Many Southerners returned home only to discover that their towns had been shattered beyond recognition. Some places were burned, some were bombed, some fell apart from neglect. Others were swallowed by poverty or transformed by Reconstruction. Some towns rebuilt and adapted. Some never recovered, and a few became symbols of the war itself. This video looks at what happened to Southern towns after the Civil War, how they rebuilt, and what their stories reveal about the aftermath of the conflict. By 1865, the map of the South looked like someone had dragged a torch across it. Town after town had experienced some form of destruction. Armies had marched through rural communities, camped on farmland, torn up fences, commandeered livestock, and seized anything that could feed or supply soldiers. Sherman's march left a trail of devastation through Georgia and South Carolina, and smaller federal campaigns had done the same in the Shenandoah Valley. When survivors returned home, they found abandoned houses with broken windows, stores with doors torn off the hinges, and courthouses with missing roofs. Churches had been used as stables or hospitals. Schools were shells. Wells were contaminated. Entire neighborhoods had been reduced to ash. The war's end brought peace, but it also forced Southerners to confront the scale of what they had lost. Atlanta was one of the most iconic examples of destruction. By the time Sherman left in 1864, much of the city had burned. Warehouses, depots, rail yards, machine shops, and blocks of homes were gone. The destruction was so complete that early travelers described the city as a clearing with chimneys sticking out of the ground. After the war, Atlanta had no choice but to rebuild almost from start to finish. But this devastation also created an opportunity. Because so much had been destroyed, the city rebuilt quickly, using new construction, new industries, and new ideas. Atlanta rose from its own ashes and became a symbol of the New South, a place that embraced railroads, commerce, and manufacturing. While many towns struggled to recover, Atlanta experienced one of the fastest post-war resurgences in the country. Richmond, the former Confederate capital, fell in April 1865 after a long siege. Before the Union Army entered the city, Confederate officials ordered the burning of warehouses holding tobacco and supplies. The fires spread uncontrollably and destroyed more than 900 buildings. Residents returned to a city that looked like a battlefield. Brick piles lined the streets. Factories were blackened shells. Government buildings were gutted. Families searched the ruins for anything they could salvage. Despite the devastation, Richmond recovered gradually. Federal officials used the city as a Reconstruction headquarters, which helped bring some stability. Businesses reopened, public services returned, and the city slowly regained its economic strength. But Richmond never forgot the destruction. Its burnt district remained a symbol of the Confederacy's fall for decades. Columbia, South Carolina, suffered one of the most dramatic wartime disasters. When Sherman entered the city in February 1865, a massive fire swept through the downtown area. The cause of the fire was controversial. Some residents blamed Union troops. Some blamed Confederate soldiers who had destroyed cotton bales. Others blamed the high winds that fanned the flames. By the time the fire died, Columbia's business district was gone. Churches, schools, and homes had burned to the ground. After the war, Columbia struggled. The state government was in turmoil, and the economy was wrecked. Reconstruction brought political change, but rebuilding took years. The city slowly transformed into a new capital for a new South. But for decades, older residents described 1865 as the year their world ended. Some Southern towns endured long stretches of occupation instead of destruction. New Orleans fell to Union forces early in the war in 1862 and remained under occupation until the end. The city suffered economically because trade was restricted, but physically, it did not experience the destruction seen elsewhere. After the war, the city exploded with political tension. Freed people wanted rights. Former Confederates wanted control. Union officials wanted order. The result was years of conflict, protests, and occasional violence. Nashville became a major Union base and supply hub. It was heavily fortified but largely intact after the war. Because it avoided widespread destruction, Nashville recovered quickly and became a growing southern city by the 1870s. Norfolk experienced repeated occupations and evacuations. After the war, its shipping industry struggled, but the city later revived thanks to the naval base. These occupied cities show how different the war's impact could be from one place to another. Small towns throughout the South faced a shared crisis, the collapse of the plantation economy. Places like Oxford, Mississippi, Franklin, Tennessee, and Selma, Alabama, were deeply tied to agriculture. When slavery ended, the economic engine of these towns stalled, stores closed. Blacksmiths, carpenters, and mill workers had no customers. Doctors and lawyers often accepted food instead of money. Landowners fell into debt. Tenants and sharecroppers struggled to survive. In some of these towns, the population dropped as residents moved elsewhere for work. Some towns slowly recovered, but others faded over time. Charleston began the war with pride. It was where the first shots were fired at Fort Sumter. By 1865, the city had endured bombardment for more than a year. Many buildings were damaged, and fires had destroyed entire blocks. Disease ran rampant. Refugees crowded the streets. After the war, Charleston struggled both economically and politically. Former slaveholding families lost their fortunes. Freed people fought for land, wages, and representation. Reconstruction brought schools and political change, but resistance was fierce. Charleston eventually recovered, but its dominance as a major southern port diminished as cities like Savannah and New Orleans grew stronger. Savannah was one of the few southern cities spared from burning because its leaders surrendered peacefully to Sherman. When the fighting ended, the city still had intact buildings, functioning docks, and a business district. This gave Savannah an advantage during Reconstruction. Freed people built thriving communities, and businesses reopened quickly. But the city still faced the same social upheaval as the rest of the South. Savannah's survival became a symbol of what southern towns could accomplish when destruction did not erase their foundations. The movement of freed men and women into southern towns brought enormous change. Places like Raleigh, Wilmington, Montgomery, and Jackson saw rapid growth in black neighborhoods. Churches became central hubs of community life. Schools opened, often in makeshift buildings. Businesses began to appear. These communities brought hope, energy, and culture into towns that had been devastated by the war, but their progress also sparked fierce resistance. Some towns became battlegrounds between Reconstruction ideals and white supremacist backlash. Violence, intimidation, and new laws worked to restrict black political power. The town-by-town struggle between freedom and resistance shaped the South for generations. Gettysburg, Fredericksburg, and Shiloh became towns defined by memory. Their fields turned into cemeteries. Their farms became battleground landmarks. Their local economies shifted toward tourism, monuments, and veterans' reunions. These towns lived with the war in ways others did not. Their identities became tied to the conflict itself. Some southern towns never recovered. Routes shifted, railroads bypassed them, and populations moved away. Towns in the Shenandoah Valley destroyed by Union campaigns. Small Georgia towns burned during Sherman's March upon rural Mississippi, and Alabama towns abandoned after repeated crop failures. These places slowly emptied until they existed only in records, overgrown ruins. By the 1880s and 1890s, southern towns were redefining themselves. Railroads returned. Factories opened. Cotton mills emerged in towns like Spartanburg, Greenville, and Gastonia. Tobacco factories fueled growth in Durham and Richmond. Universities expanded. Public schools spread, though segregated. Some towns became modern cities. Others remained rural and poor. The divide between the two grew larger. But no town escaped the memory of the war. The southern towns that experienced the Civil War carried its memory long after the fighting ended. Some rebuilt from ashes. Some reinvented themselves. Some faded away. Their stories reveal how deeply the war reshaped everyday life in the South. The end of the war did not bring instant healing. It brought transformation, conflict, and a long struggle to rebuild homes, economies, and identities. To understand the Civil War's true legacy, you have to understand the towns that lived through its aftermath. Thank you for watching. If you want more videos like this, tell us in the comments. We will see you in the next one.